I caught my best man with my fiancée 4 hours before our wedding rehearsal. And the worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was that my own father had known for 3 weeks and said nothing. My name doesn't matter for this story, so call me what my crew calls me on site. Boss. I was 31. A framing contractor outside Hamilton, Ontario. And I was supposed to marry a woman named Whitney Calder on a Saturday in late September, at a barn venue out past Waterdown, that her parents had put a deposit on a year and a half earlier. 312 guests at that point, because her family was enormous and mine was small and mostly broke, and I'd been covering the difference between what her parents could put toward it and what the venue actually cost. $41,000 all told. I'd put in 26 of it. Construction money, saved over 6 years of getting up at 5:30 and not spending it on anything that mattered less than this. My best man was a guy named Reese. We'd grown up 2 streets apart in Burlington, played junior hockey together until our knees gave out around the same age, and when I started my own framing crew, he came in as my second in command. Paid him well. Trusted him with site keys, with the truck, with my dog when I traveled. He stood up at the rehearsal dinner, 2 nights before the wedding, and gave a toast that had half the room in tears. Something about how I was the only steady thing he'd ever known, how Whitney was lucky, how he'd never met 2 people who fit together the way we did. 40-some hours later I was standing in the doorway of his apartment looking at the 2 of them in his bed. Here's how it happened. Because I know people will ask, the way they always do, how exactly does a man end up walking in on this? Reese had been renovating his own bathroom for 2 months, slow job, did it himself on weekends, classic contractor thing where your own house always comes last. He'd asked me weeks earlier if he could borrow my wet saw for the tile, and I told him to just take the spare key off the hook in my shop and grab it, whenever. I didn't care. We were closer than that. The morning of the rehearsal, Thursday, wedding was Saturday. I needed that saw back for a job site emergency. A guy had cracked 3 porcelain tiles on a bathroom floor we were finishing for a client, and the whole crew was waiting on it. I texted Reese. No answer. Called him. Nothing. So I drove over with my own spare key to his place, the one he'd given me years back for emergencies, let myself in to grab the saw out of his garage, and I heard the shower running upstairs and 2 voices. I want to be honest about the next part because I've turned it over in my head every day for 5 years, and I still don't fully understand my own reaction. I didn't go up there thinking what I was about to find. I thought maybe he had a buddy over. Maybe he was seeing someone new and hadn't told me yet. None of my business. I called his name up the stairwell. The water shut off. And then Whitney's voice, my Whitney, my fiancée, the woman I'd bought a barn venue for, said his name back, soft, the way you say a name when you think you're alone with someone. I stood in that hallway outside his bathroom door for what felt like an hour and was probably 20 seconds. Then I walked in. He'd left the door unlocked. Which tells you something about how careless they'd gotten, how long this had probably been going on, and how little either of them thought I'd ever stand in that exact bathroom on that exact Thursday morning. Reese said my name like he was trying to stop a car with his voice. Whitney didn't say anything at all. She just grabbed a towel off the rack and held it against herself, like that was the part that mattered. I didn't throw a punch. I want to say that clearly because every comment section on every version of this story always wants the violence. And I understand why, but that's not who I am. And it's not what happened. I looked at the wet saw sitting in his garage on my way out. The thing I'd actually come for, and I picked it up, because I had a crew of 4 men standing around a job site weight sign on it, and grown men have to eat whether or not their fiancée just betrayed them, with their best friend. I carried a wet saw down 2 flights of stairs while the woman I was supposed to marry in 2 days stood dripping in a towel behind me, saying my name, over and over like repetition could undo it. I drove to the job site. I cut the tile myself. My hands didn't shake, which honestly scared me more than if they had. Here is the detail that changed everything, the one I didn't learn until that night. I called my father, because I needed to tell someone before Whitney's family started calling mine. Before the story got told in a version that wasn't true. My father, a man named Walt, 63, retired from the rail yard in Hamilton, married to my mother 36 years. Went quiet on the phone in a way I'd never heard from him. And then he said, "Son, I have to tell you something, and you're going to be angrier at me than at them." 3 weeks earlier, my father had been at a Home Depot in Stony Creek, picking up lumber for a deck he was building, and he'd seen Reese's truck in the parking lot of a motel off the QEW. Not condemning on its own, except he recognized Whitney's car 2 spaces over. He'd sat in his own truck for 40 minutes deciding what to do, and in the end he'd decided to do nothing. Said he didn't want to blow up my wedding over something he wasn't 100% sure of. Said he was hoping he was wrong. Said he didn't want to be the father who destroyed his son's life over a maybe. I asked him straight, "Dad, were you 100% sure?" He didn't answer for a long time. Then he said, "I was about 90% sure." And he let me put another $26,000 and 3 more weeks of my life into a wedding to a woman who was sleeping with my best man. Because he didn't want to be the bad guy. Who said something. That's the detail that still sits worse with me than the affair itself, if I'm honest. Reese and Whitney betrayed me in the moment. My father betrayed me with 3 weeks of silence, calculated and deliberate. Weighing his own comfort against my future. The rehearsal dinner that night, I almost didn't go. But 300 guests doesn't cancel itself, and I needed to look people in the eye, before this thing became a story other people told about me. I stood up where Reese had stood up 2 nights before. And I said short and plain, that the wedding Saturday was off, that I'd found my best man and my fiancée together that morning, and that I wasn't going to pretend otherwise to spare anyone's evening. I didn't name details. I didn't need to. Whitney's mother started crying. Whitney wasn't even in the room. She hadn't shown up, which told the whole table everything it needed to know without me saying another word. My mother, Joanne, hugged me in the parking lot after and said the only thing anyone said that night that actually helped. We'll figure out the money later. Let's get you out of here. I want to be clear that my mother never asked me to forgive anyone. That distinction matters, because my father, in the weeks after, kept circling back to a version of, people make mistakes, and Reese has been like a second son to us, don't throw away 15 years of friendship. He never apologized properly for the 3 weeks of silence. He treated it like a separate issue from the affair, like his decision not to tell me was understandable caution, rather than its own kind of betrayal. That was the thing that finally made me leave Ontario, more than the wedding itself. I could have rebuilt around the affair. I couldn't rebuild around a father who'd let it happen on purpose, and still expected a relationship with Reese to survive it. I canceled the venue, lost the deposit, $11,000, non-refundable, paid by Whitney's parents originally, but I'd reimbursed half of it months earlier. As a gesture of good faith, I now found almost funny. I closed our joint account. We'd opened one for wedding expenses, $19,000, sitting in it, 11 of it mine. I pulled my half within the hour, the same afternoon, before she could think to do it first. I gave my crew 2 weeks' notice that I'd be handing day-to-day operations to my foreman, a steady guy named Patrick. No, I need a different name. Call him Garrett. My foreman. The one man on the crew I trusted completely. And I told him I was taking the company remote for a while, that he'd run the Ontario dough jobs, and I'd handle the books and bidding from wherever I landed. I picked Calgary the way I picked everything that year, which is to say almost at random. I'd done a framing job out there years back for 3 months. Knew the city had construction work. Knew nobody there who'd ever met Whitney or Reese or my father. I loaded a 5th-wheel trailer with my tools and what fit in a half-ton truck, and I drove west on the Trans-Canada in late September with frost already on the windshield in the mornings. 1,400 kilometers, 2 days. Sleeping the one night at a truck stop outside Regina because I couldn't make myself stop any closer to home than that. I arrived in Calgary with $9,000, a truck, a trailer full of tools, and a phone number I changed within the first month because my father wouldn't stop calling. I rented a basement suite in the southeast for $800 a month and took a job with a framing outfit for $30 an hour, less than I'd been billing myself back home. But I needed structure more than money right then. Within 4 months, the owner, a man named Desmond, moved me into running crews, and within 10 months he offered me a piece of a custom home division he wanted to start. I put in $12,000 I'd saved. We split 60-40, him 60, since it was his name and his credit on the line. First year that division built 6 homes. My cut was just under $30,000. While I was learning the Alberta market, my foreman Garrett kept me posted on Ontario, the way Oaks types in these stories always do. Except, Garrett didn't volunteer it. I had to ask. Month 3, he told me Reese and Whitney were officially together, that my mother had stopped speaking to my father over the 3 weeks of silence thing, and they were sleeping in separate rooms. Month 6, Reese had quit working for the crew that took over my old company's overflow jobs, started his own small outfit using contacts he'd built under me, clients I'd had for years, taking my old jobs out from under Garrett, because nobody in Burlington wanted to say no to the groom's old best man. Awkward as that sounds. Month 9, Whitney was pregnant. They named the boy after my grandfather, a man named Elwood, which is an unusual enough name that there was no mistaking it was deliberate. Or at least no mistaking that. Nobody in that family thought about taking the one thing that should have stayed mine. Year 2, my father remortgaged the house. 31 years in that house in Hamilton, to lend Reese $40,000 in startup capital for his new framing business, the one built on my old client list. My mother told Garrett, who told me that she'd fought him on it and lost. Reese's business folded in 14 months. Bad bids, no real back end experience, running a company instead of working for one. The kind of mistakes you make when you've spent your whole career being somebody's right-hand man, and suddenly, you're the one who has to know everything. He owed suppliers across the Hamilton-Burlington corridor. close to $30,000 when it went under. Year 3, my company in Calgary. I'd bought Desmond out of the home building division by then, had 11 employees, was clearing just over $1 million in annual revenue. And back in Ontario, Whitney left Reese, took Elwood, moved back in with her parents. The marriage that broke up my wedding lasted under 2 years. Year 4, I met a woman named, I won't dress this up, her name was Tamsin, worked as a structural drafter. We met when her firm did the engineering on one of my custom builds. First woman in 4 years I'd let see past the construction site version of me. She asked me straight out over coffee why a man who built houses for a living rented a basement suite, and I told her the whole thing, the bathroom, the wet saw, my father's 90%. She didn't flinch and she didn't pity me, just said, your father chose comfort over you. That's the part you're still grieving, not the wedding. She was right, and I'd never had anyone name it that clean before. Also year 4, Garrett told me my father had cashed out most of his pension. 60-some thousand dollars Canadian, his entire RRSP basically gutted, to cover Reese's supplier debts, after creditors started threatening legal action. Because apparently in my father's mind Reese was still family enough to bail out twice. My mother by then had moved into her sister's place in Burlington, not divorced, just done living under the same roof as a man whose first instinct was always going to be protecting the version of the story where he wasn't the villain. Year 5, the call came on a Sunday. My mother's number, not my father's, which already told me something. She said the house was going into power of sale. What they call foreclosure here. Though the term's a little different in Ontario. Because between the original mortgage, the remortgage for Reese, and my father's health costs after a heart scares that spring, they couldn't carry it on his pension and her part-time school board job anymore. She said my father had asked her to call, because he was too ashamed to do it himself. She said, he's sorry, you know, he's sorry every day, he just doesn't know how to say it to you directly. I said, he had 3 weeks to say something true to me before the wedding and chose silence. He's had 5 years since to say something true, and chosen silence again. I don't think sorry through you counts. She was quiet a long time. Then she asked the question I'd been waiting 5 years for somebody in that family to ask honestly. What would it take for you to come back? Even just to talk. I told her the truth, which was that I didn't know. That I had a company doing 9 figures. No, that's too far. Low 8 figures. I'd built something real, a woman I was about to ask to marry me for real this time. A life in Calgary that nobody in Ontario had touched or tainted. That coming back meant stepping into a story where I was still the son who got humiliated. The punchline of a Hamilton wedding nobody forgot. Instead of the man who rebuilt from a truck and a trailer and $9,000. She asked if I'd at least call my father. I called him that night. First time in over 4 years hearing his voice. He didn't ask me to fix anything. He just said, I made the wrong call in that parking lot. I've known it every day since. I was a coward, and I let you marry into it, instead of being the father who told you the truth even though it would have hurt. It was the first time he'd separated the two things, the affair and his silence. Instead of folding them together like they were the same mistake. I told him I appreciated him finally saying it. I told him I wasn't coming back to fix the house. I told him that the same instinct that kept him quiet in that parking lot for his own comfort was the instinct that needed to finally cost him something, because it never had. Not really, not until now. I said, sell the house, Dad, downsize. Let Reese handle his own $30,000. You've spent 5 years protecting him from consequences, and protecting yourself from an uncomfortable conversation, and both of those have a bill now. Pay it. Don't ask me to. He didn't argue. He said, will I see you again? I told him I honestly didn't know. The same answer I'd have given 5 years earlier, except this time it didn't feel like a door slamming. It felt like a door I was choosing to leave unlocked but not walking through yet. The house sold 7 weeks later for around $410,000, and after both mortgages, they cleared a little under $20,000 between them. They're renting a 2-bedroom in Burlington now, separately I think, though Garrett says they talk most weeks. Reese is doing residential renos for cash. No company, no employees. Working under a guy who used to work under me. Whitney's raising Elwood mostly alone, working the front desk at a physio clinic. Nobody in that story ended up anywhere they pictured themselves 5 years ago. Except me. I'm in Calgary, in a house I own outright in the southwest end, foothills visible from the kitchen window on a clear day. The company does custom builds and framing contracts across southern Alberta, 14 people on payroll. More work than we can take some seasons. Tamsin and I got married last June, small ceremony, 40 guests. In our own backyard. Because I never wanted 300 people in a barn again as long as I lived. I still have the wet saw. Reese's, technically, since I never gave it back and he never asked for it. It sits in my shop and I use it every week, and there's something in that I've never fully explained to anyone, not even Tamsin. That the one object I carried out of that bathroom, on the worst morning of my life, is the same tool that's cut tile, in every house I've built since. My father calls every couple of months now. We talk maybe 15 minutes, careful, polite. Neither of us pretending it's what it used to be. He's never going to be the man who told me the truth in that parking lot, instead of waiting 90% sure for 3 weeks. I've made peace with that being who he is. I haven't made peace with it being who I'll let myself be, and that, more than any of it, is the thing I actually walked away from Ontario to learn.